All right. Hey, we're live. Okay. Let's go to our lecture notes. Okay. All right. Again, a reminder that we talked about last week in terms of ethical discussions and cultural relativism, that topic of female circumcision. So reminder that we find it a very difficult topic to deal with. While many call for cultural relativism, we also have the United Nations World Health Organization saying that it's against the rights of girls around the world. So just a reminder about that. Okay. Couple of links there if you're interested in following that. All right. So I put a few connections with the American Anthropology Association, AAA, not the Auto Association. We have ethics resources here. So let's take a look at these, right? So these are some of the dilemmas, right, that you might have, and some useful resources, right? We have something called an institutional review board. Has anybody heard of this? Okay, so every university that is sponsoring research like ours, right, we get funding from all different kinds of institutions, including the National Science Foundation and others, right, even companies, okay? So when we submit for funding under the university, which even looks better, right, for funders, right? Oh, she's with the University of Redlands, right? Gives more support for it, right? Because of all those things, our university runs the risk of sponsoring our research as a legal entity. Okay, so if we mess up in the field, if we do something terrible in the field, our university gets sued. We'll probably get sued along the way as well, but our university gets sued, which means they want to make sure that we don't. So that means before we get any money, start to spend it, get into the field, we have to go through what's called an institutional review board. We present all of our research. We say, these are all the questions we're going to ask. Right? And they say, you know, I don't know about this one. This one's okay. And they tell us it's approved or it's not approved. First time I went through it through the University of Washington, I failed. I was frightened. I was like, F, you know, oh no, I wasn't used to getting any kind of an F in any of my schoolwork. I thought, no, I was horrified. They said, look, you've written down that you're going to talk to terraformers and you're going to ask them how much money they make. Anybody feel comfortable about somebody coming to you and asking you how much money you make? One, I don't care. Or two, yeah, I feel uncomfortable about that, right? Or three, ask away. The fact that there was anybody that said, I don't know about that, means that they're going to say, no, you can't ask that, right? I wanted to be able to figure out if terraforming was a legitimate economic option for terraformers, right? Here they were providing habitat for endangered birds, even better than areas that were set aside by the federal government, right? U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So if it was something profitable for the terraformers economically and equivalent to the local economy, then we could say that this is something huge, right? I mean, the government's spending for all of this money for something that's not really useful. And here it's like helpful for the terraformers to even do it because they make money out of it. And not only that, but they protect birds, right? So I wanted to know about economics. So I had to figure out another way. So one of the things that I did in the first part of my survey was to say, how much percentage of your household income do you get from terraforming? 100%. Right. Okay, got it. 50%. Okay. Some like they break out the tax statements and they like go into detail, right? Others would be like, I know it right off the top of my head. I'll just rattle it off. Okay. So these were easy numbers to acquire, not really challenging either. Almost something like prideful, like 100% of my income comes from it, right? Or, I do a lot of things. I'm a fireman. I'm a taro farmer. I'm also a taro miller, or whatever have you, right? And it makes up only 20%. Still laudable, right? Any of it laudable, right? There are only 35 or 34 on the island of Kauai alone. Like maybe 13 on the island of Oahu, another 20 on the island of Maui, and maybe about 15 to 20 on the north shore of the Big Island. That's just wetland farming, okay? There's others that are dry land, but we're talking about wetland, right? Because birds, okay? So the other thing that I found out was I wanted to track the birds with the taro being harvested, right? So like the hours that a taro farmer dedicates to harvesting, right? Or planting or whatever have you, in conjunction with the count of the birds by the area that was either planted or harvested, fallow, dry, whatever have you. Do you understand? Right? So we're tracking the birds around the field, we're seeing the connection with taro, and we're also finding out how much harvesting the taro farmer is doing. Part of the economics, right? How many bags a week do you harvest? Okay, that was an easy number to incorporate. Easy number to guess at too, right? So we went through tracking weekly data, finding out how many bags a week a taro farmer harvests, and I know the price per bag, right? Because I'm following the market. So I just got all my information that I wanted, didn't I? Percentage of household income. Then you get how much income comes from the taro fields, right? Now, I also collected information on dollars spent, right? They knew I was going to track this stuff, right? How much do you spend on fertilizer, pesticides, right? Gas for running your tractor, a new tractor, okay? So we tracked all of this information, and in the end, I was able to come up with all the information that I wanted without making them feel uncomfortable, right? So strange that I still got the information that they were uncomfortable about, but I did it in a way that they weren't uncomfortable. How do y'all feel about that? I have various feelings about it. So like, you can feel free to say, that's bad, like, shame on you, professor, right? Like I got the information that was kind of private, right? So you can kind of think various ways about that, okay? So the Institutional Review Board says, we like all your stuff, go forward, okay? That's your human subjects review, okay? We work with humans. Unfortunately, we call them officially subjects, okay? There's another term called informants. I like informants better because it goes to show, well, they got a lot of information and they're informants, right? They inform you of a bunch of information that's critical for you and that you want to learn, right? They're full of knowledge as opposed to subjects that were just like under a microscope, right? Okay. So Institutional Review Board, that's what that is. All right. Okay, and then we have statements, all right? Task forces for certain issues, right? We have specialties, okay, and you can click on these and find more information about them, okay? All right. Fieldwork dilemmas, kind of nice. 6 different cases of things to be concerned about. Informed consent, we'll talk about that, right? Talk about that today. I got to remember water next time. Okay, Handbook on Ethical Issues. This is a really, really helpful piece. Again, things that you might be concerned about if you're in the field. Okay, so those are some things to take a look at on your own, right? Here's a link to our reading for today. I'm just going to open it up in a different page. Okay. I've summarized it briefly, okay? They go into 7 points. I think that they're not enough, which is why I've highlighted what I have, okay? All right. So this is our main ethics statement, American Anthropology Association Principles of Professional Responsibility, right? Number 1, do no harm. This is our number 1, our primary focus. If you were to whittle down all of our ethics into one statement, it'd be this one. Don't mess up. Don't do harm, right? Remember, these are people, okay? It's strange that for our ethics statement, the first thing that we do is make a negative statement. Don't mess up, right? As opposed to do good and those kinds of things. But we've gotten specific more on do no harm. So we've done a lot of harm over time, and we'll get to talking about some of those cases this week and throughout the semester, okay? All right. Number 2, be open and honest regarding your work, okay? This makes sense, right? Be open in terms of don't come in covertly, act as a spy, pretend to be something that you're not, right? In fact, that goes against all of our institutional review boards. And again, our university can get sued, or any entity giving us money can be sued, right? And us, okay? Be honest about your work. Now, I had some interesting cases where I'm working with taro farmers. I was asked to work with taro farmers, right? We found that they were providing critical habitat to endangered water birds, right? I also found that it was more habitat that they were providing than the federal government and even environmentalists were able to do on their own. I found also in the process that they were being over-regulated by the federal government. Not cool, right? They were being overtaxed by rules by the USDA, NRCS, offered money, and then later told more specifics about conservation that they had to uphold. Oh, that's not fair, right? And I also found that some of the numbers of the birds were inaccurate. Think about this, okay? So we had twice a year and still do this Audubon Society count, right? And we also have a state of Hawaii twice a year count around January and around like July, August, right? So it gets a couple of seasons, right? And then we have regular weekly counts that go on the refuge for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Association, right? So I found that the taro counts on the wildlife were more or less okay, right? They were done and conducted by a wildlife biologist that I knew, and we talked about the methods, and I was well aware. I was also well aware that the numbers were lower than the taro fields, right? Had a difficult time acquiring those numbers. I had to get them through the government by a special means. We'll talk about that later. Okay, it's called FOIA. Anybody ever heard of it? Let me write it up here just so I remember. But then when you went to the numbers that were being used by the state under the Endangered Species Act, which we put them on the endangered species list, we went to how they counted birds. Now tell me, when is the best time to count birds? When's the best time to count birds? Middle of the day? Morning? Evening? Middle of the midnight? When is the best time to count birds? Think of birds on your property.
Morning.
Morning. Okay, good. Probably maybe the same kind of lighting as well, maybe 12 hours later. What do you think? Morning and evening, right? Okay. So this is what we would do for our state bird counts that were being used for the endangered species list. We would start at one part of the island at about 8 a.m. Now, sun rose at about 4:35. I know that because I love sunrise, and I used to run the beach every morning and watch the sunrise. I'm an early riser. Right? So they started at 8, which was a good, 3 hours after sunrise. And then by the time they got to the area that was where most of the birds were, 100 and maybe, no, actually about 210 to 250 acres of wetlands. When they got there, it was about noon. What do you think? Eventually, they worked their way around the island to the west side, where, again, there are a number of birds. By that time, they got there at about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Again, not yet sunset. Sunset was about 6:37, give or take 30 minutes. Pretty dead on. Okay. So the bird counts that we were getting that put the birds on the list, not accurate. Were they overcounted or undercounted? Under, right? Like there were a lot more birds than that. In fact, there were so many of one kind of bird called a gallinule or a mud hen. Let's take a look at that. Mud hen, gallinule. Okay. Cool bird. I'll turn on. There. Nobody fall asleep. Okay. So this bird, we weren't counting very much. In fact, Fish and Wildlife said they're secretive, right? Only every time taro farmers harvested, these suckers would come out and hang out with them in the taro patch. Taro farmers would be out there. I'd show up to do my research, and the birds would go, and I go, what? This is weird. You guys work around these birds, and they're all hanging out, and everything's fine. I show up, and the bird freaks out. They don't know you, they say to me. That's weird, right? But they knew the farmers, and the farmers were well aware of the numbers of the birds. Those ornithologists studying birds on the Fish and Wildlife Refuge, right, 170 acres or 150 acres, said this thing was secretive and we rarely saw it. Very endangered, right? Makes sense when we get there by noon, right? Did the numbers wrong. Didn't honestly really report how we were doing those counts, just said the numbers are low. And now we've got a problem. This is why I was concerned about honesty. Getting to it just a minute, right? These birds love the tops of nicely new fresh taro. When they eat the tops of the plant, it stunts the plant, ruins the plant. We got to replant it with a brand new huli or start, right? Kind of looks like a stalk of a celery almost, right? So in essence, this whole plant gets ruined because this thing likes to chew the middle brand new leaf. So we have some farmers that chase them off. I was aware that one individual even shot one. Do you know the fine to shoot an eagle? What is it? Let's see. I thought it was 180, but it might be 210, it might be 250. Shoot eagle. I'll probably get tagged by the government for doing this query. Shoot eagle, fine, right? What? 5,000? What the? No, okay, that was 1970. There we go, 250,000, right? I was right. Ish, right? December 2018. Okay, boy. So not cool to shoot one of these endangered species, right? I mean, mud hen, not as valuable as an eagle. We understand, we get that, right? In fact, they're, from what I hear. Right? Okay, so do I report that the taro farmer is shooting birds? How do I deal with this issue of honesty? Pardon? Enjoying my meal of mud hen and get on with it? No, I mean, like I can say not everybody is happy about the way the counts are being done, right? And I can explain like I did to y'all, counts suck, man. We all know, even as kids, when the best time is to find a bird, right? We learn that as a young age. And yet, our scientists that study ornithology are not counting at the right times. I mean, I get it. We might have some feeling of threat here if the taro farmers are good enough to manage these birds on their own. right? Remember, we first started talking about this location because Fish and Wildlife didn't like the idea of having people in their park, right? Said, it's messy, right? It's messy. These are wetlands. It's called a park by the US government or a wildlife refuge, and yet upwards of 15 different people farming taro on these wetlands. Difficult to control, right? Okay. So, again, how honest are we going to be? Or are we going to say things that talk about, well, we have some people that are frustrated with the fact that the realities don't match up with the numbers of the counts and the policy, right? Even environmentalists talk about this. When the policy doesn't fit with the situation, we should expect what? Over-harvesting oftentimes, or violation of the rules oftentimes, right? Yeah, this is an example, okay? All right, so we can talk about it like that. Certainly don't want to say, hey, Joe was over there with a gun and I saw he blew away them, right? That'd be a good way to get my university sued, right? Obtain informed consent and necessary permissions. Okay, we'll get back to this. I have this on my list too. Weighing competing ethical obligations due collaborators and affected parties, all right? I gave you an example of that. Like, it's of concern for me, if I'm going to study these endangered birds, to get an accurate report on what's happening with the birds, on how people feel about the birds. If they hate them so much, they want to blow their brains out, that's important, right? But at the same time, I've got this concern about their welfare, right? When I just started my research, we had 3 families that were located in one wetlands area or watershed, okay? Ahupua'a, we call it, okay? And these families had been there and documented for over 1,500 years. Some of the oldest taro farming went on there. And it had passed down to those same families all along the line. They went out like they always do, cleaned their awai or their irrigation ditches together, used machinery like they always do. And the state was there and they said, they're disturbing an archaeological site. Stop. And they got a court injunction against them. The archaeological site they were disturbing was the same awai that their ancestors had built. Like, it's absurd when you think about it. It blows your mind, right? So we have competing interests here because we had taro farmers that were providing habitat even more so than the Fish and Wildlife. And then we had the Fish and Wildlife using really dirty tactics to bring these guys in and stop them in court. The results meant they were all kicked off the wildlife refuge, all removed from the lands that they had historically for over 1,500 years been using to grow what they call in their culture the staff of life. Yay, right? You can see how I feel about this. Okay. Guess what happened within 1 month of removing these families from this wildlife refuge? You get the star for the day. We had grass up to here and no endangered water birds anywhere around. They had to bring in cows to eat all the grass down because of so much grass that was growing out of control because there weren't any taro farmers around to control it. So it went from being full of birds with taro farmers to being full of grass to we're struggling to bring back the populations, right? I guess by now they will have brought the populations back. Okay. But what I'm saying is that we have some concerns here for some indigenous people that have been in these areas providing what's really an important thing for their culture. And then we have another competing party that's talking about conservation, but using kind of tactics that really, when you look at the science, it's not science, right? Wrong methods. Okay. So that's what we would mean by weighing ethical obligations, okay? All right, making your results accessible. For many, many years, we were accused of hiding a lot of our results. Yeah, we make publishings, we make articles and books and things like that. Sometimes we don't, right? But the critique was, hey, you go out and study a whole bunch of people, write a whole bunch of notes, take a whole bunch of data in, do databases, run all kinds of statistical tests, write about them, and those people that you've worked with never even see any of it. So come maybe the 1990s, we started this effort to return your work to the field, right? I felt very strongly about this because I knew that the people that I was working with were endangered of losing their lands, of losing their leases. Takes about 14 months for the average taro to grow, right? The state provides areas that the federal government hasn't provided. Only about 8% of all of the taro farms are owned by taro farmers, okay? All the rest is either state or federal. And the state would come up to lottery every 12 months. A year. Still got 3 more months in the ground for us to be able to pull the rest of the taro, right? And it goes up to lottery. And anybody can outbid you. Anybody, just by dollar. There's nothing with time. Right? So in terms of insecurity, they're really insecure and have a vulnerable population, right? Endangered of being kicked out. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had all their bird count data. Everybody had all their information about how much they knew about birds, about the ecosystem, the wetlands ecosystem, about taro in general, right? And how important it was in their lives and culture, right? That was then usable in court, okay? I also reported all my data to Earth Justice, who had an agreement with the Taro Growers Association of Kauai on protecting their taro growers because of the same, because of these 3 prominent families that got kicked out. And 2 of the families were so devastated that when they finally won back rights to be able to go back, 2 of the families never returned. It was like so devastating to them what they went through. It was like a slap in the face of colonialism, right? So make your results accessible. They can be useful. They can be useful in court, right? Don't mention any names, right? This is an important piece. So we'll talk more about some of these methods and ethics. Protect and preserve your records. Oh boy, over the holidays, I dismantled my office and it was like doing a grand archaeological dig. I found things all the way back to my bachelor's studies. My gosh, my mom saved everything, including my stuffed animals. It was a disaster, right? When I was a kid, like ridiculous amount of stuff. So one of the things that I went through was going through all of my files with my taro farmers, all of my files with 25 years of work with the Mayagna and the Miskitu and all the work that we've done in indigenous land rights documentation. That was a lot, right? What happens if I lose all that stuff? Documentation-wise, I can't stand up in court for people. Also, all of the stuff that we've done have been really significant in terms of setting methods. If you remember, one of our cases that I worked on set the global precedence on how to transfer land to indigenous people, right? And defend them in court under national law, international law, you name it. That's huge, right? People are scrambling all over the world trying to get these methods into the hands of individuals that really, really need it. Those that really need to be able to defend their lands, right? There's some horrific cases in Australia going on right now that could really use these methods, by example. All over the world, right? Okay. So by preserving that information, it's also preserving your methods, also preserving documents that can be used in court to defend people, right? Or to defend you, right? You can be drug into court and, hey, where's your field book? I have all my field books up there, and all secure, coded, so there's no names, right? code books locked up. Okay, maintain respectful and ethical professional relationships, right? No intimate relationships between researchers and informants and the like. It creates a disaster. It can ostracize you from the tribe. And in an instant, you're in one group, out of another, or out of the work completely. It's ridiculous. No need for it. Huh? Interesting in my work in the Middle East, I guess I would have to say in among the Mayagna and the Miskito as well. A lot of times when I come and see people that I haven't seen for a long time, I just get so emotional. I want to give them a big hug, right? And I go to my friends that I haven't seen in a while, people that I lived with for years, and I give them a big hug, and I hear in my ear from my Mayagna friends or Miskito friends, I hear this, it's a funny noise, right? And what it is that they're not accustomed to touching. No touch, right? So going and giving them a big hug, like I'm so accustomed to, no, don't do that, right? It's a no-no, and it makes them feel really uncomfortable, and they'll just sit there and kind of take it, but it's like, no, that's wrong, right? In the Middle East, a lot of that same thing with men and women, right? Keep your hands here, but we don't shake, right? Kind of goes against a lot of our, hi, my name is, norm. But again, that's part of that respect, something that we have to learn about what's appropriate and what's not, right? Also dress, I would have to say, right? If I wear pants in the field, nah. Shorts, worse, right? Bathing suit, don't even talk to me, right? This is appropriate for me in the field. This is appropriate for me in the field in Latin America. This is appropriate for me in the field in the Middle East. Actually, Latin America, I'd probably wear cowboy boots. Some places in the Middle East as well, because it gets rainy there, right? Rainforest, and it gets real muddy, and it's like, so probably wear boots sometimes too. But ethical, responsible, respectful relationships. Okay. So that was one of our readings. Now we all know how much it costs to shoot an eagle. All right, so this is my list. I've kind of adapted what they wrote and changed a little bit. Okay. Informed consent. We can get examples of this through the university. We can also get examples of this through a site through the government. Let me make a note. I'll upload that site for you. Federal. Okay. So for non-governmental organizations that are not working under academia, they have another organization under the US government where we can do this as well. So when we're talking about informed consent, what we mean to say is we want to say exactly what's going to happen. Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to call you, or I'm going to meet with you. It's going to be 30 minutes. It's going to be 40 minutes. I'll call you once a week, right? I have to say what I'm going to do. And I'm going to say, I'm going to ask you questions about land, right? I'm going to ask you questions about economics. I'm going to have to say that they can answer any of the questions. They can answer none of the questions. They can answer all but one, as many as they want. It's all voluntary by law, right? Okay. So I need to ask permission to photograph you, to record your voice, to record you by video, right? Because I might use that anywhere, right? I have a friend on Facebook that I work with, keeps tagging me on things. Man, it's obvious that we're working together. I'm so nervous about him because he's from the Middle East, and there's some danger to doing that. There's a fatwa against it. Oh my gosh, what is he doing? Do you know what a fatwa is? You get put to death for doing something. right? There's a fatwa against people that are Palestinian selling land to people that are from Israel. Do you know that? They get put to death. Happened, actually. I had the pleasure of being able to go to a famous place in Jerusalem. Anybody heard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Yeah, like one of the holiest places in the world, right? Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is where we think was the tomb of Jesus Christ. Just recently found an area they think to have been the jail where he was jailed, right? And I got a personal tour by the guy that's the key holder. Do you know about this? Do you know who the key holder is? Anybody know about this? Muslim family that's been there since the Mamluk period, or maybe even further back, at least like 800 years, if not more. The keys passed down from male to male along the family line. And this guy holding the key gave me a personal tour of this place, right? His family just sold property that was banked up against the Western Wall. Turns out, 2 weeks later, hits the news. In the process, it was sold to Jews. Fatwa. He was in danger of losing his life. Lucky for him, they found the assistant that made it happen, Altieri or something like that, locked him up. I'm not sure if he was put to death or what happened. We have some of these things happening. There was another one that happened just this week. Palestinian American, arrested, put in jail. We just negotiated his release. Thank goodness, right? So, they're tagging me on Facebook. This is no good if I'm working in indigenous land rights, right? On either side of the fence, doesn't matter, right? I mean, these guys are like, this shouldn't be happening, right? So, this informed consent that says, hey, you might appear in a photograph of mine, right? It might end up on Facebook. It might end up on YouTube. It might end up at the UN at a meeting, right? If they say no, then I know can't do that, right? And it makes perfect sense. I mean, almost like I need to say, hey, do you remember? This is dangerous, right? One individual that I worked with on Kauai, Vietnam vet? No, Iraq, Gulf War, veteran. He fought for the U.S. government, right? Get this. Honolulu U.S. Fish and Wildlife sends a letter to all the terra farmers under their leases saying, you work with Dr. Greer and her study with birds, you're going to lose your lease. Right? Now, do I entertain my friend who says, darn it, I'm going to stand up for my rights and I'm going to do this because I'm due the respect because of who I am and who I've been, right? Or do I say, no, let's protect you and like, this is important. We can't you can't lose your lease as 100% of your income, right? So making sure that we are explicit about what the potential problems might be. Right? Yes.
Shouldn't the confidentiality of that? You're not
yes.
Their name
Absolutely, 100%. I totally agree with you. But guess what? North Shore Kauai is a small, tiny place. I go to visit one farmer. Are all the farms isolated? No, they're all like, right? Oh, there she is. There's the University of Washington researcher. There she goes again. We say, oh, look, she's working with, right? Let's say I don't want them to know, okay, right? Okay, I'm going to send everything by mail, okay? The little bird counting, thing, they just fill in the numbers and we can talk by phone and whatnot, right? Guess who's at the post office? Oh my gosh, it's like such a small island. There's like only 60,000 people on Kauai outside of all the tourists, right? Everybody knows everybody. And we have somebody that's working at the post office that's related to terra farmers and notices when all of my research you see, right? So only way I can do it is by calling. Oh my gosh, how many days did I sit there and just go from one telephone call to another call to another call to it, like packing them in, seeing how many I could get done in so much time, right? That was for people that it was sensitive for maintaining their confidentiality. right? So informed consent, got to tell them everything and get their consent. We have something that was argued in 2007 and passed, and we call it the UN DRIP. Has anybody heard of it? Yay! She's heard of it because she's had a class with me before. Excellent. Okay. It's the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People under the United Nations, passed in 2007. Like, I'm horrified to say 2007. It should have been like 19, blah, blah, right? Like 50. Right. But it wasn't. It was 2007. And in that UN DRIP, we call it, United Nations, we say that we could maybe even say the whole thing comes down to one principle. And that would be free, prior, informed consent. Free means they don't have your arm behind your back, right? Like, you got to do this, otherwise, we're going to not give you $5 million or something, you see. Prior, not after, right? Thinking about all those pipelines. No, they didn't get it prior. They didn't get the consent at all. In fact, we had the UN bring in their special reporter, a rapporteur, that reports on incidents of violations of human rights, and found out that the US government violated the rights of indigenous people in this case. We'll talk about what we do about that after, right? Informed, right? Did we tell them everything? Tell them the cautions and things like that. And consent means they got to sign, that we got to know that it's consent, right? Might even be 100% consensus of the groups that we're working with, right? Where we have to wait until 100% of them say, yes, we're going to go forward. That's a lot, right? Okay, voluntary participation, again, can't force anybody into anything, although sometimes we try. Right? USDA was issuing an annual survey to taro farmers that said, by law, you must fill this out. And with the information, they would give an economic report on the status of taro, how many taro was making how much money in the year and whatnot, right? Against the law, though. Heard another similar thing about the census. Anybody remember the census? Do you remember the census? Raise your hand if you remember the census. No? Right? Okay, come on, right? Did they come to your doors? What do you remember? People wandering around the community. What do you remember? I remember it was like 2000, I think, or something like that. I can't remember exactly when it was. Maybe it was later. Oh, it was later. 2010? 2010, right? Do you remember them coming to your door?
That was pretty, I remember seeing it was up to, yeah.
They would come back and come back and come back if you didn't answer, right? Like if you were gone or whatever reason, they would come back, right? And if you sat down and got started with them, one of the questions was, what's your cell phone? Anybody in this room would want to give their cell phone number to the US federal government through the census? Anybody? Not me either, right? Like I would run. I didn't want to be a part of the census. No, right? I'm an anthropologist. I'm a social scientist and I didn't want to be there for it. How about that? Like, that's awful. What does that say about our statistics? Probably skewed, right? Probably not complete, right? They said, well, the important thing is to know the numbers so that we can know, so that we can get the dollars to spend per person for our state, like education, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. So I guess I was doing a disservice, but I thought it was invasive. Because they said it was all required by law. I don't think so. All right. Confidentiality, again, real difficult to protect. This is one of our biggest problems with the military. If you're working for the military, how are you going to suggest that you can protect confidentiality in the event of conflict or what have you, right? So confidentiality is a big thing. Privacy. Got to make sure that we're respecting their privacy. Got to make sure that we're not going to show up in the middle of their fields when everybody else are looking, especially when they're concerned and care, right? Might be, oh, come on, we're having a big party, but that's different. Okay. All right. Also, in terms of ethical issues, we need to think about the consequences of participation, right? If my farmers had chosen to participate and also gotten this letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that said, you're going to lose your lease if you participate, that's huge, right? I mean, some of these guys doing 100% of their household focus on terraforming were pulling in like $180,000 to $250,000 a year. That's a lot of money. I mean, think about it. Like, wow, good. Really economically viable, right? They'd say the more hours you put into it, the more dollars you get out of it. Love it like that. Fascinating, okay? What about the consequences of my indigenous friends in participating in this kind of thing? Boy, lot, right? When we were in Awastingni, in the first case that we worked on, right, under international law, we had groups going through every day. We were located our offices in the schools, right? So we were located in the primary school bunked up with the high school. So they were all over there and our office was there, right? And every day we had a group of people that would walk right next to us with AK-47s going up to harvest all the trees. They had their motosierras, or what do you call them? What do you call that? I think of things in Spanish and I can't get them in English. What?
Chainsaw.
Chainsaw, thank you. Right? They'd have it on their back and they'd go up and they'd cut all these trees, right? And just float them downriver. And we'd see this every day. And every day there was nothing we could do with it because they had their AK-47s and were quite the band, right? We didn't have that kind of armory. Okay. Also, one of the cases we decided to push in court at the municipality level, and it meant we had to go every single day and review this case. And the problem was the colonists had argued, oh, the indigenous people, they sold the land to us. We paid them a long time ago. It's our right. Well, guess what? Under federal law, all the land was what we call inalienable. What does that mean? Can't alienate it, can't sell it. So if it's inalienable only for the indigenous people, that means nobody can ever buy it, nobody can ever sell it. It always will remain in the hands of the indigenous, right? That means can't sell it to colonists, it's illegal. And my friend said, didn't sell it to them, never saw any money, and it's against the law. Let's go to court. So we did, right? After the first weekend, I had a shot that went right by my window. Colonists supposedly trying to scare me away, right? And it was on a Sunday and everybody in the house outside of the kids and the moms went to church, right? They went to a Moravian church under the Lutheran church, right? Moravian. And I went to go bathe at the well with my bucket, right? My shorts and t-shirt. And right next to me, I hear this, buenos dias. And it was one of the colonists, right? And he got off of his horse right next to me, along with some other friends. There were 3 or 4 of them, all with guns, and started hunting the domestic animals across the creek that was no more than 50 to 100 yards from Kit. Oh my gosh. We start pressing this even more, and more stuff starts happening. The last day in court, we had 100 angry colonists, all with machetes, some with guns, right? The judge tried to string out the decision to be able to tell the people what the decision was. We had to call in more police and call in more military. We had escort along the way going out to the car, and as soon as we got to the house, we packed up our stuff and got on the plane and went back to Managua. It was scary stuff. And guess what? I got to leave. Yay. But my friends didn't, did they? My friends had to stay. My friends, till this very day, are still around all those angry people with guns and machetes that are not happy that they have been removed, still kind of squatting in certain places, right? So consequences of participating in Indigenous land rights, oh dear, sometimes it gets worse than it gets better, right? I hear this frequently in the field. Oh, it always gets worse right before it's going to get better. Ooh, sometimes it gets real bad, right? One of the teachers kidnapped, brought in the middle of the rainforest, tied up to a tree, left for dead, right? We found him like 3 days later. Ugh. That's the consequences in participating, right? So we have to be aware, they have to be aware, and we all have to agree that we're going to go forward very, very carefully. Now, culture and gender sensitivity, right? Culture, obviously, we know what we're talking about. Gender sensitivity, right? Now, here's something that's interesting that happens to me in the field fairly frequently. I miss the female voice. How can I even say that? I'm a female. This is absurd, right? What? It's 19, right? Almost 2020. And I say, I can't get the female voice in the field. How come? I go in to work with the Mayagna, right? Talk with people that are there. Remember, their average annual yearly income is around $800. A lot of females don't end up going to school. Some do. A lot of the leaders, kids, wives go to school. But most don't, which means that when I get in the field to talk to a woman, it has to be in Mayagna. So more frequently, it has to be with a male translator. So I've already lost the female voice just like that, right? It has to be somehow translated through a male from their culture to my ears to be able to figure it out, right? I know a few words. I know a few phrases. I can pick up things when I'm laying in bed at night and listen to the family chatter, right? I can hear more or less what they're talking about, but I can't get that female voice, right? Terraforming. Boy, you'd think Hawaii, United States, well, illegally occupied sovereign nation, we'll call it, but still, right? First world nation-ish, right? You'd think that I would be able to get the female voice there. No. I focused instead on terraforming. I said, now how am I going to define that? Well, we could say everybody that farms taro, but it's not really going to get what I'm looking at. I want somebody that has rights to a piece of property, somebody that's going to have the economic responsibility to send in their taro, right? And guess what? Only one female farmer in that role on the island. One! Blew my mind, right? So, yeah, I really missed the ball there too. Had I really targeted the female voice, I would have gotten a lot more than what I did. I would have learned a lot more about the Hawaiian culture that would be complete. I didn't, right? I could have gone back and targeted women especially, but I just, 5 years, I ran out of time, right? 5 years was enough. They're like, come on, you got to get in here and defend your dissertation. Then you can get back out in the field again, right? So, got to be careful about the populations that we're working with and how we get their voice, right? Okay. Protecting a vulnerable population, sometimes that might mean by telling them that they can't work with you because it's just too dangerous, right? Sometimes it might mean by taking special measures, only using the telephone. Nowadays, telephone's not so cool. I don't know about you, but I can tell when my telephone's tapped. It makes this weird noise, right? WhatsApp, anybody use WhatsApp? Guess what? Now somebody can create a group and hack into all your conversations. Add you to the group. Ever been added to a group by random, not by choice? You get added and you're like stuck in this thing. Ah, crap, how'd that happen? You get like 15 to 20 messages all at once, right? Well, guess what? It can be used to hack all your conversations. Now we got to find something else, right? There's an app called Signal. There's all kinds of special email things.
How is Signal? I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, you can't talk with more than one person. Just like you can talk people to people, but not with like 3, right? Not cool, right? And then the conversation is like, whoa, it's like broken up and stuff like that. Skype is open. It's like saying, oh, yeah, you can come free, right? So in terms of protecting, can be real difficult, right? Encrypted email is another way to deal with things, right? All right, so if I'm going to work with taro farmers, and like some of them, I worked with all 5 years, right? Weekly, showing up, counting birds with them, or talking about taro, whatever have you. No, I didn't harass people. I mean, it was by invitation, but like, it was a lot, right? Should I pay them for all this information? Should I pay them back for all this information? I mean, aside from giving them their own data that they already know, right? What if I pay them? How are we doing on time? Oh, we got 5 minutes. Let's see. Whoops. I don't want to give you all that information. Holy cow. Let's see. Let's say I worked with 34 taro farmers. Well, let's go backwards. Let's go 4 times a month. So 4 times 12. Oops, 56. All right. Times 43 taro farmers. Oh my goodness. This is a weekly concept, right? Times 5 years. Oh my goodness. Let's say we give them $20 every time we meet with them. Oh no. You see how fast that got? That was really fast. So one of the things that I did for paying back was give the data back. Also get into the taro patch and help harvest, right? In the beginning, I was only allowed to pull the weeds off because I would cut the thing wrong and it would ruin the, the stalk, right? But after a while, I was more helpful and worked faster, right? Learned tremendously too, right? First thing I learned was there were crystal oxalates in taro that make your hand itchy. Wake you up at 3 o'clock in the middle of the morning. The only thing that helps with it is rubbing sugar between your hands. Go try and figure that one out when you don't know. Right, 3 a.m. Also learned when I stepped into the taro fields, the different levels of mud and how much mud there was and how many different species there were. Thousands of bugs instantly crawling up my legs, which was not cool. Yeah, but like, maybe 4 different kinds of fish, 2 different kinds of shrimp, a prawn with a big arm, funny looking big arm, all kinds of species, things I never knew even to ask about, never would have known to ask about. So I got that information by wanting to pay back and help, and also by participant observation, we would call that, right? Participating. Okay. That's all I have for you today. I'll see you guys on Thursday.